Hello, I'm so glad you've chosen to tune in for another message from the Gospel of Mark. Today we're going to be looking at a few miracles that Jesus did in Mark chapter 7 and heading on into Mark chapter 8, as well as the Pharisees' request of Jesus for a sign. Let's jump straight into reading Mark 7, starting in verse 24. And from there he arose and went away to the region of Tyre and Sidon. And he entered a house and did not want anyone to know, yet he could not be hidden. But immediately a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit heard of him, and came and fell down at his feet. Now the woman was a Gentile, a Syrophoenician by birth, and she begged him to cast the demon out of her daughter. And he said to her, Let the children be fed first, for it is not right to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. But she answered him, Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. And he said to her, For this statement you may go your way, the demon has left your daughter. And she went home and found the child lying in bed, and the demon gone. Here Jesus casts a demon out of a girl, and at first he was not going to do this as he was mainly focused on ministering to his Jewish brethren. And it was not yet time for the focus to expand to the nations. However, the woman pleads with him some more, and he decides to help her. Now, this is not the only instance of Jesus performing a miracle for a Gentile. And indeed, in other situations, Jesus applauds the faith that the Gentiles who come to him have compared to his Jewish brethren who ought to have the stronger faith since they grew up as God's people. It can sometimes be true that those who are most privileged to have knowledge of God and his power and mercy and to have a relationship with God from an early age unfortunately struggle the most to appreciate God and what he does for them. Sometimes they even struggle to focus on building up their faith as much as those who come to learn of God later in life. The woman in this story knew Jesus could help her, and she made that extra attempt to gain his grace in this moment. And Jesus rewarded her faith and helped her. Let's take a look at the second miracle in this section in Mark 7:31 through 37. Then he returned from the region of Tyre and went through Sidon to the Sea of Galilee, in the region of the Decapolis. And they brought to him a man who was deaf and had a speech impediment, and they begged him to lay his hand on him. And taking him aside from the crowd privately, he put his fingers into his ears, and after spitting, touched his tongue. And looking up to heaven, he sighed and said to him, Ephphatha, that is, be opened. And his ears were opened, his tongue was released, and he spoke plainly. And Jesus charged them to tell no one. But the more he charged them, the more zealously they proclaimed it. And they were astonished beyond measure, saying, He has done all things well. He even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak. Here Jesus heals a man who was deaf and could not speak properly, and then instructs him not to spread the news of what Jesus did for him. Yet the man could not help himself. He just had to share the good news of how Jesus opened his ears and helped him speak properly. Ironically, we have all been told to go out and spread the good news that we have of spiritual healing and eternal life, and yet sometimes struggle to fulfill that great commission. Yet this man who was told to be silent went out and told everyone about what Jesus did for him. Jesus has done so much more for us and has told us to proclaim the good news of what he has done for us and that he can do for all who accept him. So we ought to do all we can to tell others about the great news of salvation and every spiritual blessing available through Jesus. The final miracle we will consider today is found in Mark chapter 8, verses 1 through 10. In those days, when again a great crowd had gathered and they had nothing to eat, he called his disciples to him and said to them, I have compassion on the crowd because they have been with me now 3 days and have nothing to eat. And if I send them away hungry to their homes, they will faint on the way. And some of them have come from far away. And his disciples answered him, How can one feed these people with bread here in this desolate place? And he asked them, How many loaves do you have? They said, 7. And he directed the crowd to sit down on the ground. And he took the 7 loaves, and having given thanks, he broke them and gave them to his disciples and set before the people. And they set them before the crowd. And they had a few small fish, and having blessed them, he said that these also should be set before them. And they ate and were satisfied. And they took up the broken pieces left over, 7 baskets full. And there were about 4,000 people, and he sent them away. And immediately he got into the boat with the disciples and went to the district of Dalmanutha. Out of compassion, Jesus fed the crowd he had been speaking to rather than sending them away to find something to eat. Jesus multiplies 7 loaves and a few small fish into a feast to feed 4,000 with more leftovers than the food they had to start with in the first place. Jesus is powerful and can do amazing things, more than we ask or imagine. Now, what was the point of all these miracles? While they did help people, which was an emphasis throughout Jesus' ministry, their primary purpose was always to show that he was a prophet, and more than that, the Son of God and long awaited Messiah who would bring salvation to the Jews and then to the nations. And yet, even with all of the great signs Jesus showed the people, it often was not enough. In the next few verses, we will see the Jewish leaders asking for more signs, likely with the wrong motives, and Jesus refuses to perform for them on cue. Let's read Mark 8:11 through 13. The Pharisees came and began to argue with him, seeking from him a sign from heaven to test him. And he sighed deeply in his spirit and said, "Why does this generation seek a sign? Truly I say to you, no sign will be given to this generation." And he left them, got into the boat again, and went to the other side. For those who had the right heart and did not feel the need to ask for a sign, Jesus was quick to perform miracles or signs that demonstrated his power and authority. John points out towards the end of his gospel account that these signs prove Jesus to be the Son of God, who we must believe in for salvation. As you read the Bible, hopefully the signs Jesus did that were recorded for us will bring you to faith in Jesus and strengthen your faith in Jesus. Now, some claim that the Bible writers invented these miracles, that Jesus never performed these miracles, yet the Bible is not the only source that recorded these signs performed by Jesus. Of course, there are other Christian historians who recorded the miracles, but the evidence does not stop simply with those who were biased towards Jesus. Jewish historians such as Josephus, who never converted to Christianity, record that Jesus performed many miracles, as do Roman historians who were not followers of Jesus. The evidence is there that Jesus really did perform the miracles written about in the Bible, which offer proof that Jesus truly is who he said he is. Next week, we will look at another healing, one that took place in 2 stages, and we will consider the significance of Jesus not fully healing him the first time, but instead healing him over those 2 stages. I hope you will join me next week for that. For now, I encourage you to check out some of our other videos if you have not seen them, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. I hope you have a great week, and God be with you.